All right, everyone. Hello and welcome into the day after Seattle. This is your comments, my reactions, our video the day after the Seattle Seahawks were defeated at the hands of the Minnesota Vikings to the tune of 30-17. The comments and questions come from yesterday's post-game video that we did after the game. So if you're new here and didn't get to leave a comment or your comment didn't get selected today, don't panic. Subscribe because there's going to be 14 more opportunities. We got 14 games to go. It's only week 3. 14 more chances for you to get into a video like this. So at the post-game video on Sunday or whenever the primetime game happens to be, don't forget to leave a comment, a question, whatever the case may be. It could be about whatever you want to potentially be featured in the day after. For today's video, we've got a lot of good comments. Monday Night Football is about to kick off in about a half an hour, so let's get going. Let's get through these, and I will give you my reactions to your comments. This is your comments, my reactions, our video, our little group collaborative project here on our small corner of Vikings internet. Pretty fun. All right, so let's get into the business here. Our first comment comes from Newt44. They say, something exciting is happening with Kirk Cousins, and it was more evident that he is getting the ball out quickly. So I couldn't agree more. A lot has changed with Kirk Cousins this year, it looks like. We are experiencing one of the highest of peaks that I think that we've seen, not in just his career, but with the Minnesota Vikings since he was signed here in 2018. He just seems different all around. The ball's coming out faster. The progressions are going quicker. I don't know if maybe losing Irv Smith Jr. was a catalyst to these offensive changes because they're being forced to use 3 wide receiver sets more often, which has led to the breakout of KJ Osborn. It's led to better offensive line play because they're not doing the things that they're really used to. And then even Dalvin Cook missing a game. They weren't really relying on him because he was unavailable. So I don't know. I don't really know what to point it to. I mean, even Kirk Cousins' off-schedule scrambling ability, like he's taking off more. He's doing more things under pressure. It's a different player, and I don't know who abducted this guy and who did they replace him with, because it's not the same person. It really isn't. So, but you are correct in recognizing that the ball is coming out of his hands with more speed, and it's definitely showing as an improvement. Next comment comes from Samson. They say, I've been impressed with the O-line past few games. If they continue to play like this, it may not be the weakness I thought it was. So, yes, the offensive line has played well. There's another comment that we're going to get into a little bit later about who is playing well and who is not playing well. But overall, the unit has surprised us. Now, let's not crown them just yet. Let's take our foot off the gas and back up just a step and observe with a wider scope, if you will, because Cincinnati Bengals, they didn't do well in that game. The Arizona Cardinals, they did much better in that game. I don't know if the Arizona Cardinals pass rush is as good as we thought it was. Maybe we just all saw the Chandler Jones week 1 performance with 5 sacks and we were like, oh God, I know I'm guilty of it. And then you throw in JJ Watt, who is not as good as he used to be. He's an aging veteran that is on his last legs. And then you get the Seattle game where their front seven also not scary. It's a defense that has become a shell of its former self. So, but the good news is they're handling their business against teams and defensive line units that they should be. The grades haven't been so great for some of them, but it has definitely been an improvement. I hope this continues. I hope that there is sustainability in the way that the offensive line played against the Seahawks, but they're going to go up against much better defenses. They're going to get tested, so it could still be a weakness down the road. Next comment comes from Paul. Do you think it would have been a different outcome if the Vikings got the Seahawks defensive holding call in the first half to extend the drive? It's hard to say. It really is. It's really hard to say. But yeah, it could have been a different game. And the reason that you may think that is, a breaking point or a turning point in the action is because the Vikings were able to take advantage of it. If you're not able to take advantage of it, then it's just another instance that occurred throughout the game. Penalties happen, injuries happen, weird bounces happen. The key is, can you take advantage of that and stick it to your opponent? Can you make them pay for the mistake that they made and getting that penalty? Now, penalties are, of course, sometimes subjective, but at the same time, if they're going to give you that edge, you got to take advantage of it. And they did. So I think taking advantage of a mistake or a penalty is more more of what we should be paying attention to than the penalty just existing and happening in the first place. Because that is what good teams do. They take advantage of opportunities that they probably shouldn't have been given, is the way that I would put it. Next comment comes from Skull Mafia. They say, all the critics unleashed the real Kirk Cousins, and I'm loving it. I've been a critic, but it's impossible at this point. So yeah, even I have had, otherworldly praise for Kirk Cousins, these first 3 weeks of the season. The guy's done his job, and he's done it very well. I feel like he's improved in terms of performance each week that we've seen him, with, of course, this most recent game happening yesterday being the absolute peak that we have seen him play since joining the Minnesota Vikings, maybe even his career. However, I don't want to, dismiss the criticisms that have happened in the past that were very legitimate at the time. Those still exist, because with what we have experienced in the Kirk Cousins era is peaks and valleys. There's never been a baseline where we can sort of settle in and be like, okay, this is standard Kirk Cousins. It's always way down there or way up there. So we're experiencing way up there. We're at the top of the mountain right now with Kirk Cousins and his performance on the field. The mistakes are going to come. He's not perfect. There's definitely going to eventually be a regression. There's eventually going to be a bad game. The key is not to overreact. And I think that's what a lot of people on the pro Kirk Cousins side are doing right now, is that, they're taking these 3 games in and they're like, oh, now you haters have nothing to say. And that's not true, because it's a small sample size still. If this continues over the course of a season and we see this for a majority of the games and against really good teams with really good defenses, then I could say we could start eating our words as critics, because maybe he has turned a page unexpectedly at this point in his career, given his age and how long he's been doing it. We all thought going into the season, we've seen what he's had to offer for 10 years. How could there possibly be anything better? And so far, he has proved that there is a little bit more to be had when it comes to his career, because he's got 8 touchdowns, almost 1,000 yards, and no interceptions. Are those MVP numbers? I don't know. It's still early in the season. There's a lot of guys that start out really hot and then they end up dwindling. So it remains to be seen. But for right now, he's definitely earned my praise, and I will rightfully give him that praise when he has earned it, which he has done. And then when the time comes to criticize him, we'll do that, because it's not about idol worship here, at least not for me. And it may be for some other people. There's some people in the comments that seem obsessed with the guy, but you know what? It is what it is. All right, moving on. We have Zachary Cunningham. They say, I get a lot of Cordero Patterson and Jarius Wright vibes with KJ Osborn. So I'm not sure about your comparisons, but you know what? I'll give it to you. I get that feeling of having a dependable wide receiver 3, finally, after so many years. Jarius Wright was an interesting player. Cordero Patterson right now with the Falcons is pretty much the only saving grace that they have on that offense, and that is a wild to think about. But yeah, good for him. As far as KJ Osborn goes, I wanted to highlight this comment because I want to apologize to KJ Osborn, because coming into the season, knowing what we knew about him from his rookie year in 2020, I didn't see him getting a place on this team. I really didn't, because I thought that he was a failed return specialist coming out of college, from the University of Miami. But there was some people that said, don't sleep on him as a wide receiver. And those people were absolutely 100% correct, because he has flourished in his new role and he has taken advantage of the opportunities that have been presented to him. And I'm just, wondering, would we be seeing this if it wasn't for the injuries sustained to BC Johnson and Chad Beebe? Because the Vikings really don't like to quit bad habits. They like to stick with those old bad habits, So, but the opportunity was given and he took advantage of it. I didn't think there was a place for him on the roster, because they drafted and signed all these guys, who could do returns when he clearly couldn't last year. But I'm excited that he's broken out. I'm really thrilled that he's thriving in the new role, and I'm really excited to see that he's been given the opportunity with the injuries to PC Johnson, Chad Beebe, and even Irv Smith, because that's part of the formation, formational changes that they've had to do with less 2 tight end sets. Then he's really risen up and become a focal point. Maybe not a focal point, but an integral piece of the offense. He's there when he is called upon. Next comment comes from Vision. They say, me and my brother went to the game and holy shit balls, it was loud. Just wanted to highlight this comment because it points to the fact that home field advantage for the Vikings is back in 2021. With the empty stadium, it was just a building, and that was all it is. The fans are the life and the blood of the building at the home games, and they make it possible for this team to have that extra advantage when they are hosting their opponents. So going forward, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Minnesota Vikings to lose at US Bank Stadium, and they're going to need to find a way to win on the road, is basically what this boils down to, because the first two road games weren't great. The Arizona game was clearly much better than the Cincinnati game, but they got to find a way to go out on the road and win one. So we'll see how that goes against Carolina in 2 weeks. The Browns are going to be a tough out next week. It's going to be a hyper competitive game, but at least we have the fans back in the stadium and giving the players the boost and the motivation that they need, because this was clearly missed last year. It was clearly an advantage that we have used in the past that we did not have last year, and it is back. So thank God for that. Moving on, next comment comes from Stuart Gonzalez Blank. They ask, after these 3 games, is Kirk finally playing up to his paycheck, or is he still overpaid? Excellent question. It's too early to answer that, unfortunately, because as I've said before, this is still a small sample size. This is only 3 games. If he does this throughout the season, finishes with some kind of crazy top 5 MVP numbers, maybe even within range of grasping a regular season MVP award, I would say the contract talk can go away. It's still too much money when you look at it from a mathematical standpoint. 16% of the salary cap is just too much to spend on one player, and I don't even care if this was Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady that we're talking about. I think that you really do have to, what's the word I'm looking for? Better appropriate your assets in order to build a team that can win at a sustainable rate, if I could put it that way. I think the contract is just too much. Even if he was playing lights out as he has been for these 3 games across like 4 seasons, I would still say it's too much, because we've seen big contracts become problems for teams in the past. I think of Joe Flacco in his contract that he got after winning the Super Bowl, and how that team eventually got decimated over the next few years because they just couldn't afford anything, and a lot of players left in free agency anyway, because that's typically what happens unless you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from last year. So I think he's earning more of, I really think he earns his paycheck every week, whether he plays poorly or not, but I think he's earning some more leeway in terms of that conversation, especially now. Next comment comes from Tim4CN. They say, what do you think about Everson starting and having Wanham and Weatherly backing him up? 100%. Let's do it. I think Everson Griffen has clearly demonstrated that he is physically capable and schematically capable in terms of grasping the defense having returned to Minnesota and producing at a high level. The dude still has it. Does he have it to be a starter and, take a majority of the defensive snaps week in and week out? Possibly, yeah, I think he does. DJ Wanham is not playing well enough. He's not playing well enough to be a starter. I think Everson Griffen provides you with that spark, that attention that offenses will switch over to and take away from Danielle Hunter, because Danielle Hunter can't be the focal point of the offense, of the opposing offense's game plan, and take him out of the game. So I think Everson Griffen is probably on his way to being a starter for this team in the near future. Next comment comes from Giddy Kong. They ask, who do you think is playing best on the O-line and who is playing the worst? So this is actually a pretty easy question to answer. As far as the best player goes, we'll start with there, glass half full, I guess. Brian O'Neill is clearly by far and away the best offensive lineman that we have right now, and he's playing like it. I forget what the specific statistic was, but I believe he's the only tackle having played 80 or more snaps this season, or 80 or more snaps in a game. I forget what it was. I think it was 80 snaps this season, but he's allowed no pressures. So I think Brian O'Neill is going to continue to be the best offensive lineman that we have throughout the season. I reserve my right to change my mind once Christian Darrisaw gets into the picture. Having said that, speaking of Christian Darrisaw, he needs to get into the picture sooner than later, because I believe that the worst offensive lineman right now in terms of performance and evaluation is a tie between Rashad Hill and Garrett Bradbury. Garrett Bradbury is, I think, sort of being hidden by the offense's success in Seattle and Arizona, but he is still clearly a problem. And they might be looking for an upgrade to the position next year. Rashad Hill is clearly not a starter. He's a backup swing tackle. He'll be replaced as soon as Christian Darrisaw is ready to go. So it'll be interesting to see what they do after that. But the scariest thing about the O-line is Dakota Dozier is back on the active roster. I don't know how many people saw that. So yikes. Hopefully that doesn't mean anything. Final comment comes from Too Evil to Hope. They ask, do you think Madison should be involved more, even when Dalvin Cook returns? Yes, absolutely. My one criticism against the Vikings' offensive philosophy has been, why are we paying a whole bunch of money to a running back that we are intentionally running into the ground, right? Because I think he had almost 400, maybe even more touches last year through receptions and carries. It's too much. It's too much tread on the tires, especially in this era of offense where the rules and the defense favor the passing game. And I kind of hope that they're seeing now, given the success that they had in Seattle, the way that Clint Kubiak was calling plays, the success that they were having with those plays, 3 wide receiver sets, not always running on second and long, not always feeling like we need to establish the run and feed Dalvin Cook, who is our best player. No, you don't need to do that. This is not 1995, and I hope that they're starting to see that. But yes, getting back to your question, Alexander Mattison should absolutely be featured more, not just to spell Dalvin Cook and save him from injury, which he seems to have a problem with because this is another missed game for him, just because he's earned it and he's a really good player. And I think that the offense would benefit from having him in there. So that's going to do it for this edition of The Day After. Those are your comments, my reactions, our video. Thank you very much for joining me. I will see you in the next one.